Good morning, everyone. Just a bit of background about myself for those who don't know me. My name is Chris Polder. I'm the founder and CEO of OSINT Combine. I come from a military background in the special operations community in Australia and got into the OSINT space to continue contributing back to the national security sector through other means. And we do that through training, our software platform, and other means in special projects. As Nico mentioned, spent a lot of time on the road and around the world, spent a lot of time in Nico's country end of last year. But today, I want to talk about the impacts of AI with OSINT from a practitioner's perspective and also from an adversarial perspective. What are the things we need to look at and what are some of the risks that we're going to be facing? So the why we're looking at that is we need to understand emerging technologies. We need to be aware of what this is, how this is going to affect us, and there's two things I want you to take away from today. From the why. Primarily looking at stimulating ideas. It's not going to be every answer today, but if you're not using this technology now, I want you to stimulate ideas of how you could potentially integrate and use this stuff in your workflows in the future. The other one is to appreciate changes in behavior for how we interact with data, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit. And also to understand what are some of the threats from generative AI and how that applies to what we do from a practitioner's perspective. Again, understanding and leveraging technologies and understanding threats. Key things we want to tackle today, and we'll go into a little bit of depth across a number of those areas. But the first one is we need to unpack this, dial this back, and baseline everyone on what we're talking about today. So we're looking at OSINT emerging technologies and what is generative AI at a very basic level, and then we'll get into the fun stuff of how it can be applied. So obviously generative AI, capable of generating new data based on patterns that's derived in massive amounts of data. So the reason why this is important is because it anchors to behavioral changes of how we're going to interact with data in the future and massive amounts of data and the outputs that we're sort of looking at. AI models generate various types of content, text, images, audio, and we're going to go into a little bit of that today with some voice cloning examples and some of the threats around that for deepfakes. And it does that by looking at patterns and building rules that can then generate new content on the back of it. It uses things such as large language models, and that's kind of the hype at the moment that most people are aware of, but it's not the only one. It's just the one that we're most prominently aware of when we use things like ChatGPT in its infancy, but now it's multimodal, so we're using it in various forms beyond that. And we're going to dive into that a little bit more. It's just so we're all talking about specifically generative AI in today's talk. The key thing for all of this is human-like interaction with data, and that's the change. Now, I want you to anchor that in the back of your mind for how you might, at the moment, go and search for data. Keywords, things like that. Where this changes is asking human-like questions of systems. The same way you would interact with a human to ask questions of their analysis or asking them for information, whatever it is. This is how we're changing our behaviors for how we interact with technology. And that's the key thing that generative AI brings to the table. Implementations, various implementations. You've got text, ChatGPT, Bard, or Gemini now, Ernie by Baidu. There's heaps. You've got image implementations, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney. It goes on, and more of these models are sort of coming out every day. This is a fast-moving environment. And you can track that whether you look at it from an economic perspective or from a technological perspective. Video implementations, obviously a key one, the ability to generate videos. We saw that with OpenAI's new implementation just last week, generating full CGI movies from a single text prompt. Game changer stuff. Industries are at risk, and these are some of the things that we need to be aware of because it has other flow-on effects for that. And then audio. Because all of these things tie together as both an opportunity and a threat picture. Because it's the fusion of all these things that then really take, what is AI? When we start to, in our minds, envisage, when someone says AI, what is that? People have these thoughts about humanoids and all those sort of things. We're not at the stage of artificial general intelligence, which is the road that all these LLMs are sort of leading to. And that's the stated objective of OpenAI and a lot of those organizations. Right now, where we're sitting at is the fusion of these technologies and how they might apply to all of us. So how do we tie this back to the Intel cycle? What is the so what here? Lowering the barriers to entry for interrogating complex data sets. Co-piloting workflows. How can you co-pilot your collection, your processing, your analysis, and your reporting and dissemination? It really does lower the barrier to entry, and this is how it aligns to things in the intelligence space for how we sort of move this forward. And where can it apply today? Look at it from a process map. Upstream, downstream, and then the process in the middle there. Upstream being things like decision makers, deep analysis. Downstream being your analysts who are doing the rapid pivoting and collecting that data and working through it. And then obviously the process aspect in the middle. Collection, processing, analysis. When we look at that, what can we address today? We're not talking about all the frictions. We're going to touch on those in a minute. What can it really do today? Low-hanging fruit to create efficiencies. Sit reps, data processing, quick pattern analysis, hypothesis generation, ideation companion. There's a ton of opportunities for where this sits now and where it can help today. Because at the end of the day, what is that trying to achieve from a co-pilot perspective? Time. Time and access. It introduces all sorts of issues when your upstream can now access what it relied on from downstream previously. You'd ask a question of an analyst, they'd go and actually do the work and bring it back. Some of the risks we have now is someone that's sitting upstream can just go and access that, and it could be completely wrong. Okay, so we've got challenges, but this is, when we look at it where it can help today, it's in some of that middle task with the processing. Where it doesn't help at the moment, lack of context awareness for the surrounding issue. Now, when people talk about context awareness in Gen AI and stuff at the moment, it's often confused with the context awareness of the conversation in the prompt. ChatGPT recently just obviously introduced memory, so it can follow what's going on. It's got a much bigger context window. That gets confused because of the word context. What I'm talking about here is it's not context aware of the surrounding issue because it's only in line with what you're prompting and engaging with it. Okay, so just something to think about. Whereas an analyst, a human analyst, knows all of those tangential aspects, or should. Hallucination issues, bias, get your bingo sheets out. Unclean data, accuracy and reliability. So intelligence products centers on the accuracy. So when we look at these black box solutions, how does that all tie into it? Legal and regulatory compliance, intellectual property, all those sort of things. Intelligence product criticality is obviously legal and regulatory alignment for how it was collected, legal, ethical, moral, all those sort of different aspects. Integration with existing systems, high side versus low side. These are challenges. So we're not trying to fix and solve all those challenges. I've participated in a number of AI working groups with government bodies in Australia and the US. And these are things that are still being worked through. What we're talking about today is how can it affect and support or enable you in an OSINT workflow today. Think about the evolution of this technology. What's there today will be very different to tomorrow, and it's moving at a fast pace. When the internet first came out, we used to rely on librarians to go and get our data from the library and find our information. And the internet and search engines that kind of changed that paradigm, but that shifted over time. Look about translation when you use Google. It used to be very bad. More and more people use it. Now it's actually very, very good. When we look about lowering barriers to entry for data interrogation, I just want to touch on this really quickly. Right now, and this is more from a data science perspective, like if you're interrogating things like CSV files and you're kind of in the numbers, an analyst might ask a question, get a data scientist to go work on it. Data scientists will then go and ask a technical question of the data as they work through that. And apologies to the data scientists if I'm butchering your art here, but that's kind of how it works. You get an answer back. Gen AI approach, the analyst is just going to ask the human-like questions of the data set. And the data scientist is more or less working on the backside with the Gen AI and machine learning models to start refining and bringing those back. So again, it lowers the barrier to entry and it creates more direct access for human-like interaction with data. The point of this slide is to talk about behavioral changes for how we interact with data in the future. And we're starting to see that now. If we ignore that, you'll be the person that can't turn the computer on. Like when my mum calls me and tries to ask, how can I access my email? It's those sort of things, and this is where we need to be aware of it. Big red box. Nothing changes from the criticality of validating information, sourcing, data reference points, how the information was derived. That's no different to what you do now. If you go on Google and search something and you're going to validate and verify that information, if a data scientist gives you data back that says this is the the pattern analysis that we've identified for troop movements in a particular area, what's the data that actually led to that? You need to be able to source and reference that. No different, we're just applying technology to do it. And then understanding the difference between what you're doing online versus offline, building your own large language models. We're going to touch on that very quickly, sort of towards the end of the chat, on how you can do these things securely and not just rely on online systems. Because remember, ChatGPT is just a tool that sits over the top of these models. You can run your own tools on top of your own data sets and models. How can we apply it for OSINT? Okay, so let's jump straight into how does it apply for what we can do now. Research assistance, efficiencies, technical enablement. These are just ideas, media processing. You can use it for threat group backgrounds, information environments, location information, situation bottom line up fronts, data processing, reporting templates, synergizing information, geospatial fusion, bespoke tool development, and then everything else. These are just ideas of how you can apply this today, okay? So we've got to kind of choose. Do we want to take the red pill or the blue pill? Let's look at ChatGPT specifically. Generative pre-trained transformers is what it stands for. It's currently available in 3.5, version 4. Difference between that is, 3.5 is built on 175 billion parameters. Version 4 is 2.5 trillion. It's just, it's far better, far more scale, and far richer context, bigger context windows, not situational context, but context windows that you can apply, all these sort of different things. You can access it via APIs. 3.5 and 4 is public access. There's an API. The differences is like data storage, things like that. You've got to be aware of that. What goes into the training models. For example, when you use the API, it doesn't go into the training model, but it does store your data for 30 days to detect abuse. Enterprise, things how you can apply these in an enterprise environment. This is just to dial everyone into ChatGPT specifically. Remember, I had that slide up before with all the other different aspects. This is just, we're going to focus on this today for the examples. When you're using these systems, right now you do a course, you learn how to Google Boolean search. Now, and as we evolve, we run courses on this stuff. Prompting tips is a big one as well, because that is now part of the discipline of how you interact and search for data. Ask questions in a human-like conversational manner. Give it context and constraints. If you don't give it constraints, you're swimming in a sea of data and you're going to not focus in on what you're after. Challenge it when you're giving those constraints, and that comes down to using chain of thought sequencing. So when you're asking it and you're interacting with it, hey, tell me what's going on in this particular location. Okay, great, it gave me that stuff. Okay, now I want you to break that down and only focus on this area. Okay, in this area, who are the main players? Okay, for those people, where do they operate and what is their background? Use that chain of thought sequencing because that's where you get the most value out of it, and particularly now that there's memory integrated at a far greater scale for things like ChatGPT-4. But at the end of the day, it's only as good as the question you ask it, and that is no different as when you ask an analyst to do something right now. If you ask an analyst to tell me what's going on in the world, they're going to be like, well, hey, the world's a big place. So you've got to refine it down, and you've got to make sure it's only as good as the question you ask it. And that goes back to constraints, context, and chain of thought sequencing. Practice. No different to your Google searching. Practice. Okay, you'll get better at it, and you can do some really cool stuff. And that's what we want to jump into today, because this is the fun stuff. What about creating efficiencies? I'm going to start with something really simple, pretty boring. Everyone's like, yeah, cool, got it. Doesn't really matter. But it can maybe trigger some ideas for people who aren't using it. You want to create a daily briefing on the Israeli-Hamas war with references to Western and non-Western sources and extract actors and locations into a table for further investigation. So you see how I'm giving it constraints and parameters that I want it to do? I'm very focused on what it is. It's going to go out to the actual internet. Another key question everyone asks, but it's so old data, it only trains up to a certain part. All the plugins now, you can get right out to the internet. You can scrape the web with it. You can use it for those particular aspects. And when I get to the tooling stuff, there's something in, as Andrew was talking before, I'm going to touch on how quickly you can turn things around using this. So I've asked it to literally just write that question. It's going to go and give me the response, and you'll sort of see how this goes out. Excuse my poor spelling there. And it's going to go out live. Now, by default, because of the relationship with Microsoft, it's going to go out to Bing. You can point it in other directions. You can have plugins that can point it to different websites. You can tell it to scrape particular websites. Okay, it's very, very easy to do, and it's all integrated. There it's going out to Al Jazeera. It's going out to a number of different websites because I've asked it for non-Western sources. you can get very specific. So if you've got a data catalog of sites that you're scraping from each day to build your news data set, ask it to go target those. And you see there, it brings it down, gives me a situation update. You know, might make it nice and quick. You could write this as an automated system that just gives you a dump each day. And that may replace you going to every news website, or it may replace your RSS feeds. You might integrate your RSS feeds and scrape directly from them. Yes, you can do that too. And it can summate what you're looking for. So, you know, it's giving me military actions, dip effects, cross-border movements, regional engagements. That's okay, that's just a summary. But it's what it does with the next point. OSINT's all about pivoting, right? Moving around data points. So rather than having to read each of those articles that I might do from a news site or any of these aggregations, I've just asked it to extract the locations and entities. Give me a nice table of, you know, 5 or 6 different organizations there with a background information about who they are. It's already moved the needle and saved me probably 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. Efficiencies. Remember that graph, that process map? Time. That's what we're saving there. And then sourcing. You want to ask it for sourcing. You're going to go and validate it. So this is just an example of one thing you can do, and that's the so what. It's some of the efficiencies. Again, we're just getting warmed up. What about technical enablement? Physical terrain analysis, hard tasks. What if I want to map all the waterways and land bridges in Malaysia to understand littoral access in the country? We want to use things like overpass turbo. Yes, you're going to use geospatial intelligence organizations, but you might not have access to those. You're doing this in the PAI space. So you can use a system called Overpass Turbo, and those who are familiar with it, allows you to write queries and access crowdsourced information for infrastructure around the world. Challenge, you need to understand query language. Okay, there's a barrier to entry there. Not anymore. I've just asked it to do that. It's going to generate me an Overpass Turbo query. I don't need to know anything about the code. I don't need to know how it works. I can just challenge it. Another key point. If you get a result and it's like, that didn't work, you don't stop. You say, hey, that didn't work. You challenge it. Written entire 3D computer games with this by just asking it questions and challenging the code responses back. Happy to sort of go into that offline in another set. You see there, it provides a query response there. Again, I don't need to understand the code. Ignore that. Just copy the code. Gives you the instructions of exactly what to do with it. Go over to Overpass Turbo, paste that in, run the query, and in about 30 seconds, you can get all of the littoral access into Malaysia. Imagine trying to do that manually, or the hours you would spend trying to refine your ability to understand how to query that. The speed and efficiency for things like physical terrain analysis. Let's go to another level. Same one. Let's look at something probably more in the energy sector. Maybe it's national security related, power stations or critical infrastructure related, power stations in Sydney. Okay, same deal. Write an Overpass Turbo query, all the stations in Sydney, and then I'm going to go and run that. That's fine, nice and easy. Power nodes, generators, stations, same deal, same process. There is a so what to this though, to show you how we can chain of thought sequence things like this into other technologies. I've grabbed that, you've seen all the nodes there. That's nice and easy. The nodes will come back in just a second. Says it's got a lot of data, no dramas. I've got all the power stations or critical infrastructure in Sydney. Now I need to validate those. I get all that. But it's just saved me a hell of a lot of time with my start points. It's moved me down the road faster. The so what of that is, cool, I've created this map. I know where they are. What other systems can I use? What other technology can I use that might be from a cyber perspective? What if I'm looking at things in mainland China? What if I'm looking for all the power stations and critical infrastructure in mainland China that I might be interested in? I've got all the data nodes, no problems. Wouldn't I use something like Shodan maybe to look at all the IoT devices? Maybe some of that stuff might be of interest. This could be defensive in your own nation. This could be offensive offshore as well. I don't need to know Shodan and how to do the complex query languages because I just asked ChatGPT to write me that query. And you know what? I want it to just give me the URL. I don't even want to go to Shodan and paste that in and muck around with that. It gives me the complete URL down the bottom because I might embed that in an internal system. It could be a refresh each day. And there you go. So that's coming straight from Shodan. So this is how you can use it in those contexts as well. You can chain of thought how you might build and interact with systems. And that's the so what is the efficiencies of how you can use these things. What about DFIR, log analysis? Very quickly. Analyzing logs and identify anomalies for suspicious behavior. Okay, we've all got systems. There's probably very expensive systems. I don't really work that much in the cyberspace. But we had an incident where I needed to understand some pattern of life or some pattern analysis on a log file for someone accessing our system. And I went through it manually. It took me 4 hours to identify the anomaly. And I got sick of it in the end. I found the anomaly. I was like, I just had a thought experiment. I wonder if ChatGPT could do that for me. So I sanitized the log, just so I know it's going up to ChatGPT. It's not stored. I turned that off, but it's still going up there. So I sanitized the log and asked it to analyze it for me for those anomalies from a DFIR perspective. It read the log clean. I didn't tell it anything about the log. It broke it down, told me it was looking at timestamps, active types, and these are login activities for a SaaS platform. It then looked at it and identified multiple failed logins, geographical irregularities, timestamp anomalies, diverse user agent strings, and IP address switching. It took me 4 hours to do that manually. Literally 15 seconds. I was kicking myself afterwards. I still need to validate it when I went through it, but I could also challenge it. In the hotel room last night, I had a very similar thing where I was analyzing some user data just to understand a particular pattern. And it called out a bunch of things that I reckon would have taken me a good 8 or 9 hours to find myself. Bespoke tooling is a really cool one. In-flight tools. I'm going to ask it to build me a tool to generate most common email providers in non-Western countries. Very simple tool. This is an example. And the point of this is you're going to have things you're doing day to day where you're like, you might have your commercial tools. You know, we play in that space. You might have your free tools that are available, but there's a middle ground there where you still need to solve a problem and there's no tool for it. You don't have Python skills. You don't have JavaScript skills. Get it to build a website. I've literally just asked it, build me an entire website so I can input a first name and last name and generate email permutations of it. It'll then go and build that. I don't need to know any of the code. If the code doesn't work when I copy it, I just say, hey, that didn't work at this point. Or I look in the console and it gave me an error. I just tell it the error. It's so nice, it'll apologize to you for making an error, which is great. It's far better than working with most teams, right? So it's going to generate that. You just copy and paste that into a file, and then you're off. Okay, so you can go and get the tool, and I'll show you. I'm going to copy it now, literally putting it into a text file. That's it. That's just Notepad. I'm going to save it and open up the file. I didn't need to know anything. It told me exactly what I needed to do as well. So just for awareness, the structure of the steps are provided for you as well. It doesn't leave you swimming in the dark. You go to Stack Overflow, and you're looking for how to challenge something or how to code something. You'll get bits and pieces, but you never get the full walkthrough. This is a co-pilot. It helps you walk all the way through it. So you can see there, very simple example. As Andrew was giving his talk, he put up those APIs. And I was curious, could ChatGPT map all the military aircraft? I just asked it, as I was sitting over there, create me a map in JavaScript that would plot all the markers, and I gave it the API for the military aircraft one, generated a website. 20 seconds later, on my laptop there, I've got a map with all the dots on the screen from the API. So rather than looking at a JSON packet and trying to figure all that out and like, what do I do with this? ChatGPT built me a tool for it. Okay, just an example. Jump over there if you want to have a look. That's the so what, is efficiencies. What about image analysis? It's not great just yet, and you're still going to use your Google Lens and all those sort of things. But what if you're given this image and someone said, where in the world is that? You can use it and ask it, analyze this photo for where this is probably likely taken, pull out the features for me, flora and fauna, and give me some context. It called out, this is terraced fields with a hallmark of tea plantations. If I looked at that photo, I don't know what a tea plantation looks like. It's given me a pivot point for OSINT. It's made the world a hell of a lot smaller. It called out, and it's very hard for you to read up there, but it says indicative of Cameron highlands in Malaysia, possibly in Munnar, also maybe China or Sri Lanka. The whole world just got a hell of a lot smaller for those areas. It was spot on first, though. It was in Malaysia, in the Cameron highlands. Now, this was one where it worked. I've tried others, and it hasn't worked. But it breaks down the photo for me, so it saved me time and gave me pivot points. And this is what it provides. It gives me the breakdown, the buildings, the roadways, the natural landscapes. Structures are likely used for housing workers and facilities related to tea production facilities. So it understands those different aspects. things you can use it for, okay? Not perfect, but it's there. It's a bit of a combination of who cares and so what. It's how we interact with data is changing. This is another tool in the toolbox, and these are things we need to be aware of because it can help you a hell of a lot. Matt mentioned it this morning. He uses it every day. I use it every day. When it doesn't solve that problem, I ideate on where it might solve that problem in the future, okay? What about bad actors? Let's just go back real quick. Bad actors and disinformation content. I just want to touch on this, and I'll brush through this pretty quickly because it is a problem. Echo chamber steering, and I'm not talking about big mass campaigns. I'm talking about when messages hit those closed channels. We're all in a WhatsApp group or a Signal channel or a Slack channel, and your friend posts something, and how many people in that channel actually validate that before they pass it on? Because if it's interesting and you get that dopamine hit, you instantly click forward without thinking. This is what I'm talking about. This is the risk with this stuff. So in this example, I'm just going to give you a quick run through. I've asked it to write me which world leaders are against climate change. So I'm creating context. I've then asked it, I've grabbed one of the presidents there that's related to the comment, and I've said, write me a comment from their perspective about fake climate change. So this works because the person has a very public profile, so it can build tonal alignment for how they might talk. I then grab that, I go to Facebook, the live Facebook page. I find a post that might be of interest. And I'm going to inject that comment to the site. Now, remember, this is client-side because I've rendered the Facebook page. So it's not going into Facebook. No one going to the Facebook page is going to see this. But it's what you do with it next. Because that post exists, but you're putting the comment that was generated by ChatGPT into it. And you'll see there I've just injected it into the HTML code there, and it looks real. And I can then take a screenshot of that and put it into my echo chamber, and that's the point. Because it's close enough to the truth, or there's a close enough validation point that someone who was fact-checking that would go there and see that. And they'd be like, oh, I see the post, I see the image, I see the timestamp, that all aligns, but they've changed the comment, maybe because there was backlash. They can use that as a point of argument, okay, because you can't validate if that was or wasn't changed. That is a problem, because your source validation is close enough to the truth where people are going to believe it. I've created this is just to give you an example. It's just a WhatsApp group, a fake one I made, and you can see how easily I stick it in there, and the first thing people do are like, oh man, that's crazy, and they just forward it on, okay? The so what of this in a real-world example, Israel Hamas war. The Telegram channel grows from 200,000 to 600,000 after the invasion. 239,000 posts views per post. You only need a small fraction of the people in that post. If a disinformation post or a screenshot of exactly like I've done in the context outside of that realm goes into there, only a fraction need to follow that on without thinking. And no one can validate where that information came from. Problem. No solution. Problem. Advanced public channels, uncontrolled messaging channels. Okay? What about voice cloning? Big problem. Real-time spear phishing, bank fraud, commander impersonation, giving fake direction, eliciting information through trust, harassment and abuse. Voice cloning is a problem. What about your voicemail message? Because I can take a sample of anyone's voice and now clone it and instantly send it and have it speak for me. Let me give you an example about this. What about all the presentations online? All of us who do a lot of presentations online, we're cooked, okay? Think about this now. This is 11 Labs. I've uploaded a voice sample. I took a 3-minute sample from one of my presentations a couple of years ago, created a voice clone of it. It took me all of 1.5 minutes. Gave it a quick description. I was very generous with my age. I said, use the voice. And I said, hey, John, I'm currently on the road to a conference and need urgent transfer of funds as my wallet was stolen. Can you send me some gift cards or something? Oh, when I lost access to the email account for the group, can you just send me the password? Imagine you send that to your VP of finance or someone like that. You're their boss. They're going to listen. Click generate. Can you get the audio working, mate? Okay, well, it sounds exactly like me. Let's give it another go. Because I do want you to hear it. You've heard me speak now for the last 30 minutes. And I want you to hear what it sounds like, how real it is. So think about how this could be used by someone in your team against you, bank fraud, all that sort of stuff. Deepfakes. I'm going to bring up a slide in a minute that will make this real.
Hi, John. I'm currently on the road at a conference and need an urgent transfer of funds as my wallet was stolen at the airport. Can you send me some gift cards or something in the meantime? I also lost access to the group email account. What was the password again? And I'll add it on my phone.
Sounds pretty convincing, right? And that's only after 3 minutes of sampling with no tweaking. So yeah, there's inflection points. But you're on the road, someone leaves you a voicemail, and that's a problem, okay? How do we challenge that? How do we fix that? Do we need 2FA on every phone call we make? There's tech going into chipset authentication for voice signatures. All of that is obviously being worked on by people way smarter than me. But it's something to be aware of. Spear phishing got a whole lot more dangerous. Business email compromise, whole another level now. What about bad actor GPTs? And there was a slide on there. A Hong Kong investment firm got robbed of 25 million, 250 million because of a deepfake CFO. Okay, deepfake CFO joined a Zoom channel and somehow convinced them to transfer money. I don't know more than that, but have a look online, Google that. It's interesting. Bad actor GPTs just coming up to time here. Worm GPT, Evil GPT, Fraud GPT, Wolf GPT, XXX GPT, and these are all GPTs and large language models trained on hacking data. So you can automate all of these threat things. So there's a whole world of bad actors out there in this realm. Sensitive data for offline Gen AI. Very quickly, because we're going to run out of time here with the audio sample. But you can generate your own LLMs on your own data. Generally 3 approaches. Train one from scratch, difficult, lot of data. You need the billions just like OpenAI. You can fine-tune an existing one. Technical barrier. You know, you need smart people working on that, but it's workable, it works. You can use an LLM to accept its limitations. You can download these large language models and use them now. And there's heaps of very good ones, and they're contextually different, and they apply differently to your mission sets. Private GPT is a great little library. It's a little bit tricky to get it set up. A lot of Python in there. It's a bit of a pain. Micah knows how much I love Python. But you can get your data offline and supports a variety of documents. The difference here is, rather than having your SharePoint, you know, where you search for a document by name, you can now ask it human-like questions. So in this, I've had it set up. I've uploaded files. I downloaded 30-odd research files for hypersonic weapon development, and I was just curious, what data could I get out of it? So I asked it. I uploaded the data. It trained on it. So I loaded that up, and it started training on those files. All offline, 0 touch point to the internet, completely secure. And now I can ask it, what is the current state of hypersonic weapon development around the world? Okay? And which countries are at the forefront? Gives me my response, gives me my source referencing within that document as well, so I can start working with this. So it's changed a little bit of how I interact with my documents. Offline, secure. You might be like, well, what if it misses stuff because it's an LLM and it's talking? Well, you know what? It's got another feature, search within documents. You're like, yeah, but I can search within my documents now. Yeah, you can Control F within your documents right now, and you're left with a whole bunch of keywords that you need to next, and there's 1,000 of them. Search within your documents by asking it a question. See how I'm interacting with my data differently. I'm asking it, find the references to France working on hypersonic weapon development. That way, I've actually got the documents without just keywords with the word France in it, because that could be in every document. And I've asked it in a human-like manner. It's changed the behavior of how I interact with data. Okay? Something to think about. So risk and considerations, OPSEC, bingo. Data retention and data storage, privacy and international landscape, accuracy in sourcing. These are all challenges and risks that we need to take seriously. Today was to stimulate ideas. Doesn't dilute or diminish any of the seriousness of these. Copyright, ethical use, prompt engineering by bad actors, data poisoning, all those things. All massive problems which we cannot address in 35 minutes, but we'd love to chat to people more about it. In summary, how we interact with data is evolving, how we interact with information is evolving. With every good, there is bad. With every bad, every good. verify and validate. Analysts are more important now than ever. We just want to keep the analysts equipped with what is the latest technologies so they can get better at what they do. Thank you very much, everyone. I really appreciate your time. I don't know if we've got time for questions, but I'm more than happy to speak with people afterwards. But Matt, over to you.